Hello, welcome to Forest Focus. As Nottingham Forest look poised to strengthen their defence with a £12 million move for Fiorentina centre-half Nikola Milenkovic. It looks strong business on paper, but is it? Joining us to tell us more about the 26-year-old Serbia international, I'm delighted to say, is TNT Sports Serie A commentator Adam Summerton. Adam, good to have you back with us. How are you doing?
I'm really good. How are you?
Good. Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. Enjoying a few days off in inverted commas, but doing this because it's interesting, important news. Forest on the brink of signing what looks like a really good player. Like I say, you're TNT Sports commentator for Serie A, so you've seen a fair bit of him and Fiorentina in general. Just tell us a bit about the player in terms of his build, his attributes, maybe his weaknesses from what you've seen of him. What do you make of him?
Well, he came through the youth system at Partizan in Serbia, which has produced a lot of players, as many people will know over the years. He signed for Fiorentina for, I think it was around €5 million 7 years ago. And in that sort of 7 seasons, he's amassed a lot of appearances. He's been consistent performer in Serie A, 216 top flight appearances in Italy, which is obviously a very healthy number over a period like that, emphasized and underlined by the fact that he's made 30 league appearances or more in 5 of those 7 seasons. And one of the ones in which he didn't was his first season when he was a relatively inexperienced player. So it shows that he's somebody who doesn't suffer too much with injuries. He's been pretty consistent. I think an important thing to mention as well is that he's been capped 57 times by Serbia too. Somebody who made his senior international debut 6 years ago at a relatively young age in 2018. And again, just to go back to how regular a presence he's been in that Fiorentina defence, he played more minutes than any other Viola outfield player last season. Although the one thing I would say is that last season probably wasn't his strongest season for Fiorentina. I've seen him have better campaigns for them, but he was still pretty consistent. I think most people would probably agree that he was still the best defender there, and he had several different defensive partners there as well. If I tell you his inspiration growing up was Nemanja Vidic, that maybe tells you a little bit more about him. He's 6'5". He's naturally good in the air. There's a real physicality. There's a natural aggression to his play. I would also say that he's pretty good on the ball. He reads the game well. He's relatively comfortable bringing the ball out. And if you look at his numbers in terms of what is termed these days as progressive passing numbers, they're very good. So he's somebody who can start off attacks. So all round, I would say a very good player. And I think Nottingham Forest fans can be pretty excited about this signing, actually.
Just backing up what Adam says there, just looking at him a little bit, you can see this is a graphic taken from WT Analysis as normal, WT_analysis on Twitter. You can see his aerial duels one is absolutely ridiculous. The defensive duels as well. As Adam says, really good age, lots of experience. One of the weaknesses of Forest, Adam, last season, I'm sure you'll have known, was defending set pieces. He looks like a kind of a nuts and bolts defender who can play a bit as well. Does that kind of fit what Forest need, you think, then, in terms of taking responsibility, winning battles, heading the ball away, that kind of basics but important work?
Yeah, he is somebody who does take responsibility. He's taken on at times, I would say, quite a leadership role within the squad. Biraghi is the club captain at Fiorentina, or has been, and I think that. But I would certainly put Milenkovic as one of the leaders. I mean, at 6'5", that's a really imposing figure, and somebody who is, as you say, and as you've stated there too, he is very good in the air. I think he can organise too. So, yeah, I think he is somebody who could perhaps help in terms of those set piece problems that were very clear with Forest, and it was something that they desperately needed to address over the summer. And I would suspect that his signing will be with that, partly that as a consideration, I would have thought.
What kind of clubs are he coming from in terms of Fiorentina? I know they had a good run in Europe, losing to Olympiacos, ironically, perhaps, in the end. What kind of side of Fiorentina in terms of how they play, the shape they play, does it translate well for Milenkovic with what Forest are about in the Premier League?
Well, he spent the last 2 seasons under a coach I rate very highly called Vincenzo Italiano, who's actually just left Fiorentina to go to Bologna. He guided Fiorentina to 3 finals in those 2 seasons. I feel he really helped move the club on, Italiano. In fact, I remember Milenkovic actually saying that he felt that Italiano was somebody who would help develop his game, and clearly felt that he did in the 2 years that he worked under him. Italiano typically played a 4-2-3-1 formation. He's a relatively pragmatic coach, though he can be versatile in terms of what he plays, but it was typically 4 at the back that he would have been used to playing at in terms of the last couple of years. In terms of club football, they were a side who liked to have a lot of the ball. I looked up their average possession for last season, which was 57.4%. Only Napoli and Bologna averaged more possession in Serie A last season. They were also quite an aggressive style in terms of their press. I think anyone who watched them in Europe over the last 2 seasons would have seen that. There's quite an energy and intensity about Fiorentina's play under Italiano. Milenkovic is predominantly right-footed, but I noticed that he played on both the left and the right of the centre-back pairings that we used last season. I think it was to the left of Martinez Quarta, the Argentina centre-back, and on the right of Ranieri typically. But he is somebody who I've seen play at right-back during his career. I've seen him for Serbia play on the right-hand side of a three-man centre-back defence. I've also seen him play in the centre of a 3-man defence, as he did at the Euros for Serbia. And just listening to some regular watchers of the Serbia national team, they seem to feel that that was where he was probably best deployed, where he could be most dominant, most effective, was in the heart of a 3. If it is a 3 that any team he played for used, that was where maybe he was best. But as I say, he can also play at right back and on the right and the left of a centre back pairing. So he's somebody who's quite versatile in that respect. And I would underline again that he's a leader too, and I think that's so important, particularly as you mentioned about set pieces too, having that leadership, those organisational skills. There is an aggression about his game that sometimes can mean that he can pick up some unnecessary bookings. I would say that. But I think it's that aggression is a more of a positive than a negative for him. And look, I think you probably would want to know as to why Fiorentina are selling him, which I can tell you if you like. But I think there'll be Fiorentina fans who will be very disappointed that he's leaving.
Why Fiorentina selling him?
Well, I think that the fee is for me, it's a bargain. If what's reported is true. I mean, I've seen some reports of 12 million. It's always difficult interpreting whether it's euros or pounds, what people are talking about, but 12 to 14 is what I've been seeing. And I was really surprised at that. I mean, my first instinct was there's got to be a clause in the contract that he signed in 2022, which is until 2027. So we're talking about a player with 3 years left on his contract. So maybe there was some sort of stipulation in that last contract that he could leave if a certain offer came in at a certain time. I don't know. That's purely speculation on my part. Another thing being talked about in Italy, and particularly in Florence, is that perhaps this is cost cutting on the behalf of the owner, Rocco Commisso. And if it is, I think that will be interpreted as a lack of ambition by Fiorentina fans. But again, that's just speculation on my part, and I suppose on the part of other people as well, because he is their highest earner by quite a distance. Partly because of that contract that he signed in 2022. He's on 5.6 million euro a year. I think their next highest earner would be Gonzalez, who's on 3-something million a year. So that shows you how big a earner he is, not in Premier League terms, but certainly in terms of Serie A and Fiorentina. So that could well be a factor as well, that they're looking simply just to save money. But, he's somebody who was very valued, or is very valued at Fiorentina. Remember the sporting director, Daniele Prada, describing him. It's a term that you often hear used about very key, important players in Italy, that they'll call them a pillar of the side. And that's what Prada referred to Milenkovic as very recently, said that they turned down far bigger offers in the past. I've seen offers. I remember a couple of years ago, people were banding about figures of 30 million euro plus. And now he's a more experienced player, perhaps even a better player. He's in his prime years, 26. I think he's 27 in October. So if this all turns out to be true and Forest get this player for the figures being quoted, I would suggest that they have got a really good deal here.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I imagine Forest putting their hands in their pockets for wages to get him over, obviously. But say you didn't know about this rumour and it was a week ago, and you were saying a Premier League club were coming in for this player, what kind of Premier League club would you think he would have gone to? Like a Villa or a West Ham or something, or that kind of bracket table?
Yeah, I think that maybe a Tottenham, a Villa,
Mm.
a West Ham, the type of club who will see themselves as if they were to have a good season, they would finish in the European places. If they had a truly exceptional season, they might be in the conversation for the top four. But would be very disappointed if they were mid-table or lower. That would be where the sort of type of club that I would expect him to be at. So, as I say, I mean, I talk about it maybe being interpreted as a lack of ambition from an Italian, from a Fiorentina perspective. You could look at it and say, look, this is an ambitious signing from Nottingham Forest, even though the money at the figures quoted doesn't necessarily suggest that. But this is a player with a lot of senior international experience. He's just qualified for the Euros with Serbia for the first time as an independent nation. Yes, they didn't perform as it happened at the tournament, but just to get there was a real achievement. He's a big part of that. He's reached European finals in each of the last 2 seasons with Fiorentina. He's got a lot of European experience. And I think Nottingham Forest, having survived last season, will see that now they've to progress as a club, even if they weren't to qualify for Europe this coming season, which would be a push, admittedly, when you bear in mind this was a side that was fighting relegation last season. I think that's got to be ultimately where Forest start to try and push towards. And this would be a signing that I would feel would be a signal of intent in that respect. I'm not sat here saying that Forest are going to finish in the European places next season. If we're honest, a mid-table finish would be great. I mean, you're a Forest fan. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I think that would be real progress. But this is a signing that I think can start to take them on the path, if that makes sense, to that. I mean, Milenkovic is a player who's used to playing in Europe. So I think that says it all, really.
Oh yeah, I'd 100% take mid-table comfort, and a lovely cup run is the dream as we sit here right now, certainly. Last question I wanted to ask you is kind of Serie A versus the Premier League. Someone of my kind of vintage used to watch Italia 90, Football Italia on a Sunday and think, oh, it's all defensive football. It's all built on that kind of AC Milan impregnable back four. I guess that reputation lingers a little bit. Is it completely false? And is Serie A football much faster and much more akin to the Premier League than what it might have been 15 years ago?
Yes, it is. I mean, it isn't the catenaccio that that some people still associate it with, that of more defensive style of play. You just refer to that great Milan side of the past that won the European Cup, conceding, I think it was 3 goals or something ridiculous like that on their way to winning it. But no, I mean, it still has that reputation of being, and I get it all the time. People tell me it's boring and defensive. And my first reply back to that is, well, you've just told me that you don't watch the league then, because that just isn't how it is. And the side that Milenkovic is coming from is a prime example of that. I mean, the aggressiveness with which they press, the energy that they used under Italiano, it's just nothing like what some people would associate with Italian football. What I would say is that I think you can defend well without necessarily being ultra defensive or defensive per se. You can be organized and not concede a lot of goals, but not necessarily be defensive. And I think that's something that Italian football is really good at, because one of the reasons I really like Italian football is because it's a nice hybrid between what you might term in the Premier League as that high octane, energetic, up and at 'em style of football that we really love in England. But also it has a bit of that, quite a lot of that, but also it has that real tactical intrigue as well. And that's something that's really hammered into anyone that plays in the Italian leagues, is there's a real expectation on the players that they're able to take on a lot of tactical instruction and then carry it out on the pitch. If you listen to any player, particularly British players that have gone over to Italy and played there, I mean, another centre half, Fikayo Tomori, who's done very well in Italy, has said this a lot, that the tactical side, his tactical understanding is improved immeasurably for playing in Italy. So that's something that perhaps Milenkovic will come over with. I mean, it might take a bit of adjusting for him, that maybe there's less emphasis on that in the Premier League. But I think he's somebody that's very capable of playing in different styles. I mean, I've already mentioned to you that he typically plays in a back three with Serbia on the right or in the centre of that back three. He can play at right back. He can play in either of the centre back positions, right at the centre back or left in a 4. So this is somebody who's quite versatile and has a lot of different attributes that I feel could well be quite suited to the Premier League, actually. I think it's certainly one of the things you will often hear about players coming to England is, can they handle the physicality? Well, that's one thing. There's absolutely no question over him at all. He'll revel in the physicality. In fact, he'll absolutely love it.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that all sounds very exciting. If you want to see Milenkovic in action, touch wood, hasn't happened yet, but touch wood, it will. You can get down to the Trent Nav before the match and enjoy the pre-match build-up with Simon Fotheringham as normal. A new outdoor screen, a new outdoor pizza oven, 2 bars, so you're not waiting for too long. The Premier League is not too far away. Right, we'll be back tomorrow with Kieran Maguire. Appreciate people's patience with my not having my mic or my camera. I am away, but did want to do something on Milenkovic because he does sound exciting. And thanks for Adam for joining me at, well, short notice. I think I messaged you about 11:30 last night, and you replied this morning saying, yes, no problem. So you're a good man, Adam. Thanks for doing that.
Pleasure. No worries. Take care.
Excellent. Hope to have Adam back on through the season every now and then, get his insight. In the meantime, like I say, Kieran Maguire tomorrow, but in the meantime, we shall see you soon.